Snow-capped mountains tower over tiny towns. Fields blanket the valleys in every direction, with cows dotting the landscape. The Red Rock Desert stretches out to the south and the west. We are in the southwest corner of Colorado, in Montezuma County. To the south, Mesa Verde National Park stands sloping and proud, holding on to homes built into cliffsides that have housed people in this landscape for over 1,000 years. To the east, the La Plata Mountains rise steeply to 13,000 feet, rocky and difficult to navigate. To the southwest, the landscape climbs gently in a series of hills to the summit of Ute Mountain, home of the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, one of only 2 federally recognized tribes in Colorado. The mountain stands tall behind the city of Cortez. To the north, the San Juan Mountains, one of the most rugged ranges in the state, stretches out. We are nearly 8 hours from Denver, over multiple mountain passes, 7 hours from Phoenix, 4.5 hours from Albuquerque, and 5 hours from Salt Lake City. It's a part of the state of Colorado that feels incredibly separate from the rest of the state, both geographically and culturally. It's the Four Corners, and it's my home. I'm Ilana Newman, and I'm a reporter for the Daily Yonder, and you're listening to Getaway, a deep dive into rural recreation economies. This podcast series will take us all over the country, from my home here in the Southwest to New Hampshire, West Virginia, Washington, Oregon, and Utah. We'll talk about what it means to be a recreation economy, how our rural communities are shifting, whether or not tourism and recreation are a boon for rural communities, the tourism housing crisis, how climate change could affect rural recreation economies, and how we access our public land. We'll talk to academics, community leaders, town employees, economists, recreationists, city officials, and so many other experts about what it means to create and exist as a sustainable rural recreation economy. But what is a rural recreation economy? In a way, I made up this term to lump a lot of things together, although there are programs and organizations that look at and study rural recreation economies under other names. One of those names is a gateway community. Gateway communities lie just outside of popular outdoor destinations like national parks, but they could also be beach towns or ski towns. Places that visitors go to spend time outside and also, hopefully, spend money in town supporting that community's economy. Many gateway communities are by nature rural, but not all. Sometimes this happens just by the nature of having a lot of public lands surrounding you. Often, these communities are limited in growth through physical boundaries, like being located in a small valley surrounded by mountains. This keeps physical growth to a minimum, so they can't really grow beyond a small rural community. However, not being able to sprawl can also cause increased demand for the property that's already there. Later in the series, we're going to talk about housing prices and how some recreation or gateway communities deal with an increased cost of living. Here's one person I talked to from Outdoor Recreation Roundtable who gave me a good overview of what even is a recreation economy.
I'm Chris Perkins, and I work every day to illustrate the benefits of outdoor recreation across American society as well as within the American economy. And I do that as the vice president of programs at the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is a coalition of organizations including trade associations, businesses, state offices of outdoor recreation, nonprofits, and academic partners who come together to discuss issues of shared importance to outdoor recreation, as well as to speak with a unified voice to leaders, to members of Congress, to agencies, to the general public about the value outdoor recreation provides across the country. One of the angles that we utilize quite often is the economic impact angle of outdoor recreation. Every year, the US Bureau of Economic Analysis releases something called the Outdoor Recreation Satellite Account, which estimates the total economic impact from outdoor recreation nationwide. And for instance, in 2022, which is the most recent year of data, they indicated that outdoor recreation contributed $1.1 trillion to the US economy, 5 million jobs, 2.2% of GDP. And all that national impact is, of course, a significant contributor to state and local level economies as well. And this lens is one that policymakers and practitioners tend to really gravitate toward.
I asked Chris how he and the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable define a recreation economy.
We run with the same definition that the US Bureau of Economic Analysis uses to describe outdoor rec, which is all activities that occur for pleasure that occur outdoors. So that can look a lot of different ways, from hiking, biking, skiing, climbing, hunting, fishing, boating, angling, camping, RV, hospitality, off highway vehicles, horseback riding, scuba diving. It can also just look like sitting and being present, watercoloring, bird watching, whatever it is that makes you feel whole outdoors. And I think it's important to call out that diversity of interests. I think there is not one way to enjoy the outdoors. The benefits that occur from being outside can look a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. And we're not here to prescribe one way that you should do it. I think that's also an important conversation around inclusion and belonging. If you share a more expansive definition for outdoor recreation, makes more people feel like they belong outdoors. I think connects more people to these natural places and cherished spaces. So that's the broad definition for outdoor rec.
Yeah, I like that. And I just like to start there because it is a lot more expansive than maybe some people might think.
Yeah.
And then as moving into the economic conversation, that can look like so many different things and not just a ski resort. So can you talk about the connection that you see between outdoor recreation and rural communities?
So for quite some time, rural communities have been the backbone for the outdoor recreation economy. And they are the oftentimes last touch point people have before they go and have adventures in the outdoors. And this isn't to totally discount all the amazing urban and city based outdoor adventures one can have. I lived in New Haven, Connecticut for a number of years, and the park down the street, which was just a handful of acres, was my like cherished outdoor destination. But of course, many of the grand, sort of charismatic outdoor landscapes or public lands and waters across the United States are adjacent to rural communities. And so these places have always been at the center of the conversation around the outdoor rec economy. Not only do they provide the goods and services and gear and apparel, oftentimes to have a great experience outdoors, they also provide the interpretation, the guides, the outfitters, the people who ensure that you have a safe and memorable experience outdoors. They're the places that you come to after a great trip and enjoy a meal with your companions. And they're where the workforce lives.
The University of Utah has something called the Gateway and Natural Amenity Region Initiative that studies some of the challenges that these rural recreation or gateway communities have and helps these communities think about planning and growing sustainably. I talked with the founder and co director of the program.
I'm Danya Ramori. I'm the director of the Environmental Dispute Resolution Program, which is based in the Wallace Stegner Center at the College of Law at the University of Utah. I'm faculty in the College of Law and also in the City Metropolitan Planning Department at the University of Utah. And then I also founded and now co-direct the Gateway and Natural Amenity Region, or NAR initiative, which works with gateway communities throughout the West, meaning small communities near major natural amenities, whether that's a national park, ski area, scenic lake, or river. And we're particularly interested in these places because they have been very desirable places to live in and visit for a long time. And that's become increasingly so in the aftermath of COVID-19 and everything the pandemic brought. So they are very interesting places from a planning perspective because they have what we call big city challenges in small towns once they get discovered and really start to develop.
Can you talk a little bit more about what some of those quote unquote big city challenges are once they start to develop?
So our gateway communities, or sometimes we'll call them our NAR, Gateway Natural Amenity Region, or Gateway Natural Amenity Region communities, are places like Moab, Utah, Springdale, Utah. Springdale's right outside of Zion National Park. Places many people have heard of, like Jackson, Wyoming, Aspen, Colorado. But there are also places like the community I'm from, Sandpoint, Idaho, which is in far northern Idaho, and places here in Utah, such as Blanding and Bluff, a lot of communities that people have not heard of. And when we think about these communities, we're interested in these places because they are proximate to very high quality natural amenities. And it's important to note that some of them have been discovered and have been developed because of those natural amenities. So again, many of the places I mentioned, the Aspens, Jacksons, Moabs, some of these places haven't been developed and they may never get on that trajectory. But we're interested in them because they have some of the preconditions for places that might become outdoor recreation hotspots, places people want to buy second homes in. And when they do get discovered and developed, often what happens is you sort of get on a development trajectory, you get a cool coffee shop, you get maybe a brew pub, and then all of a sudden more people are coming, you develop more trails and recreation opportunities, or your ski area gets better known. And it creates a bit of a just a spiral of attracting more people, and then you get more amenities, and then you attract more people. And so when that happens, often what these communities see is they get a lot of second home owners. Often they become very desirable places for short-term rentals, such as Airbnb and VRBO, because people want to come, stay, recreate, enjoy the nice quality of life that these communities typically have. And when those things start to happen, you often get a lot of pressure on housing in these communities. So one of the biggest challenges these communities have once they really become discovered and developed, and we see this in places ranging from Moab, Springdale, Park City here in Utah to again very much so in the Jackson, Wyoming's and Aspen, Colorado's. But what you see in those places is really acute pressure on housing, and particularly difficulties finding housing for the local workforce. So a lot of times the local workforce effectively gets priced out of these communities. The people who work locally can no longer afford to live locally and therefore get pushed out. And what's interesting with that is one, it creates a lot of challenges for the community. And this is not just necessarily restaurant workers, but it can be your local teachers, even your local doctors. We hear in many of these communities can no longer afford to live anywhere near the community.
These are all topics that we're going to explore more in later episodes of the podcast, but there's more to the recreation economy than just national parks, than just tourism. That is a huge part of it, but in my conversations with experts, it inevitably gets more complicated. Here's Chris Perkins with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable again.
I think you start, of course, with tourism, which is how historically people have viewed outdoor recreation. The idea of bringing more visitors and their spending activities into town to create economic activity at small businesses and contribute in that way. So tourism at large. You also look at the potential to develop new businesses within the recreation economy. So I'm thinking about new guiding and outfitting operations. I'm thinking about retail stores. I'm thinking about entrepreneurship and manufacturing and companies that want their products rooted in place. And so, for instance, you're from Memphis. They could move to Memphis and design a very cool, innovative product that was designed and built in Memphis, Colorado, and that being like a stamp of approval for the recreating public, a product that is like legitimate and cool for them.
Another theme that came up time and time again in my conversations with people about what this thing I'm calling a recreation economy is the community. It all comes back to what the community wants and creates for itself, not for tourists, not for second homeowners, for the people who live there and are invested in the town and the community. This isn't a new concept. In our reporting on rural communities through the Daily Yonder, it feels like the push for being driven from and by the community is a constant theme. Things go wrong when an idea comes from outside of a community, and it's no different with recreation. When we're thinking about how to grow a recreation economy in a sustainable way, the bottom line is that it needs to come from the people who already live there.
A place that has a strong outdoor recreation economy has to naturally have opportunities to recreate outdoors that are enjoyable and nice. But beyond that, I think it's the people. It's the community advocates, the local spark plugs and champions who live and breathe outdoor recreation and see its benefit to the community from a lot of different lenses and can build a coalition and momentum and excitement around that vision. Rural communities have no shortage of excitement, passion, and inspiration, but they're oftentimes very limited on bandwidth. And so having these community spark plugs, these innovators within coalitions to actually bring people together, as well as some support from what have been called backbone organizations that provide places for convening and facilitation and strategic planning. That tends to be the special sauce that gets a lot of excitement and buy-in from disparate parts of the community and actually builds a vision that everyone can get behind.
We'll be right back after this break with a dive into what this means for a community like mine, that while having a lot of natural resources for people to recreate in, is not necessarily a destination for tourists.
Hey there, I'm Claire Carlson.
And I'm Julia Tilton.
And we're reporters for the Daily Yonder, a national newsroom that covers rural America.
Every other Wednesday, we host the Rural Reporter's Notebook, a podcast giving you a behind-the-scenes look at how we're covering small-town stories from across the country.
There's a lot of myths about rural America out there. You can count on us to unpack today's biggest topics and what they mean for life in rural places.
From natural disaster recovery to DEI programs to the coastal town that fixed its erosion problem, the Rural Reporter's Notebook brings you an inside look at how we find, tell, and share stories about rural life.
Find us on the Rural Remix feed, wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Getaway, a deep dive into rural recreation economies. Here in Montezuma County, we get overlooked for tourism and recreation. Despite having a national park, Mesa Verde, a national monument, Canyons of the Ancients, and plenty of other public land, we're kind of seen in the region as a drive-through community. We're bordered in the east by Durango, a popular tourist destination. About an hour north of us lies Telluride, a wealthy ski town full of ski bums and second homeowners. To the west, about 2 hours away, is Moab, Utah, with two of the biggest national parks in Utah and the western U.S., Canyonlands and Arches. Montezuma County and its county seat, Cortez, get somewhat written off in favor of some of these bigger destinations that surround us, practically on all sides. And in a lot of ways, that's how the locals like it. Of course, when I was reporting for this podcast and in conversations with people in my community, I hear all the time that people don't want this place to grow. They don't want to be like Moab. They don't want to be like Telluride. While many people would love to improve Cortez's economic benefit from the recreational opportunities that surround us, that can't come at the cost of locals' quality and affordability of life. But economic benefit from recreation doesn't just look like having more visitors. One of Cortez's biggest manufacturers is Osprey Packs. They make backpacks for travel, outdoor adventure, and everything in between. Many of the Osprey employees are also deeply invested in outdoor recreation in the area, from biking the local trails to volunteering for outdoor nonprofits and doing trail maintenance. This is an example of a way that when community members are invested in recreation, it not only improves the quality of life for the people who live here, but also the experience for visitors. With a population of about 26,000 people, Montezuma County does not have an economy specifically dependent on recreation or tourism, although that is a part of our economy. It has a little bit of everything. Shaq Powers works for Region 9, the Economic Development District for Southwest Colorado, and he told me a little bit about how he sees the county's economy.
The economy in Montezuma County is like a three-legged stool, right? We have oil and gas, primarily Kinder Morgan, and that goes through the typical boom and bust of normal oil field production, depending on what's available in the McElmo Dome, as well as whatever the political climate is towards drilling at the time. And then there's agriculture, right? Agriculture has good years and bad years. Looking ahead, there's plenty of water in McPhee right now, but we're going into a drought. But it's been a very dry winter so far. And when we have periods of intense drought, agriculture is hurt. So you got oil and gas, you got agriculture, and then the third stool really that we have is tourism. Mesa Verde National Park and is probably the biggest draw to the area. Then everything else is kind of the supporting services, right? So you've got the hospitals, the school districts, the medical field, government, CDOT, city county government, those types of things that fill in the gaps. The service industry, which we have a lot of, that falls into the tourism category. We've got all of that related to tourism, and then the other two legs of the stool have really taken some heat in the last couple of decades, through either drought or through the bust cycles of oil and gas. So tourism is kind of steady throughout all of that.
Right now, the biggest piece of that stool is tourism. But Montezuma County also wants to diversify that so that they are not overly dependent on one industry. Montezuma County receives about 1 million visitors a year. Around half of that, about 600,000 people, are visitors to Mesa Verde National Park. But the other half is spread out around recreation areas around the county: McPhee Reservoir, campgrounds in the La Platas, Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, and more. But for the city of Cortez, there's still a lot of potential for the town to capture more of the dollars that tourists can bring to the community. Helen West is the Community and Economic Development Specialist for the city of Cortez.
Mesa Verde is here in Montezuma County. However, there's a lot of people coming to Durango, staying in Durango, visiting Mesa Verde, and then immediately turning around and going back to Durango. So we're not seeing that sales dollars. Now, that's not Mesa Verde's fault. That's not Durango's fault, right? That's how can we incentivize people to stay in Cortez? The other aspect of that is we have a lot of trails here. Phil's World is nationally known as a great mountain biking place. What do people do? They drive from Durango to Phil's World, and then they immediately turn around and go back to Durango. So we're not getting the revenue that we need in the county and the city sales tax to help maintain those trails. People are using those trails, but then not putting that sales tax revenue in the community that is actually maintaining that trail system.
One of the infrastructure projects that the county has been working on for more than a decade is a trail that would connect the city of Cortez to Mesa Verde National Park and then the town of Mancos. The trail, known as the Path to Mesa Verde, is looking for funding right now to start construction. Having a trail like this would incentivize visitors to Mesa Verde and Phil's World to continue on to Cortez after their outdoor recreation adventure. In 2020, Colorado Governor Jared Polis signed an executive order that created the Colorado Outdoor Regional Partnerships Initiative. This supported the establishment of regional groups to create local plans for outdoor recreation development. As part of the initiative, grants are available for regional partnership organizations through Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Great Outdoors Colorado, which receives funding through the Colorado Lottery. In Southwest Colorado, the Monte Coalition is the regional partnership that came out of this initiative. The Monte Coalition is a group of stakeholders from around the two-county region, Montezuma and Dolores County, which is the county directly north of us. And they're currently working on creating a strategy for sustainable recreation in the region. The group includes ranchers, the local tourism agency, county and municipality representation, nonprofits, and land managers. Everyone who has a vested interest in seeing our outdoor recreation amenities taken care of and supported in a sustainable way. Michelle Fury is the director of the Monte Coalition and told me that they've been working to identify what the community cares about around outdoor recreation. Here's what she had to say is one of the biggest things that the community cares about.
Equitable access to outdoor recreation. It is adaptable, so ADA use, but it's also very much built around cultural and socioeconomic demographics, so making sure that there's access to gear and access to transportation and that everyone in our community has the same opportunity to be able to go out and recreate in the same way that our visitors do, or somebody that can afford all the fancy stuff to go and do all of those things. And so That's something that this community has identified as being really important, and especially going back to the cultural piece of that. And this is where actually it's very similar to the San Luis Valley. Particularly, I think, in an agriculture community, they're already outside working hard. They don't quite have the same mentality of going out to recreate for fun. They're out there working hard. Also finding a way that agriculture can live in harmony with recreationalists. That's a big issue.
I'm really curious about that intersection. What are you seeing that these members who are in that agricultural industry, how are they reacting to this whole project? Where is that intersection?
For one thing, they really want to, and I don't mean to generalize agriculture, I'm going to go with ranching. Education, I think, is respect and education are the two big things that I hear the most. Understanding when you've got cattle grazing on public lands and they're with permit holders, gates closed, not scaring cattle, so, they scatter and they, then they start to mistrust humans, and it becomes a lot harder for ranchers to gather them back up again. Sharing the trail, equestrian users, would say the same thing, sharing the trail and respecting that that's a big part of the economy here. And a lot of what is afforded to visitors is because of our local economy. And so, it really is a critical piece. And then there's opportunity as well. And this is something that we're just also starting to explore in agritourism. I'd also include natural heritage in that. So respecting, again, the heritage of the pre-Puebloan people and the Ute Mountain Ute tribe and other tribal members that are within this vicinity, even on the outskirts of our sort of region that we're calling a region. Understanding, what biodiversity that they've subsisted, upon for so long, and so how important that is to protect that as well. Another thing that we're talking about in our meeting next week is capacity, workforce funding, outdoor recreation management, and infrastructure. We continually see federal budget cuts, hiring freezes. So it's really a chicken and egg thing where how are we going to grow and sustain a healthy outdoor recreation economy when we have a lack of infrastructure and a lack of capacity.
And that lack of capacity is really a theme throughout many rural recreation communities that we talk to for this project. And it's a through line in rural reporting more broadly. If there's no money, there's no capacity. And sometimes there's not enough capacity to get that money in the first place. It's kind of a chicken or an egg situation, as Michelle says. For a community that doesn't have a lot of tourism money, there is very little capacity for building and planning infrastructure. And once that tourism money is plentiful, it could be too late to actually do the planning to avoid becoming one of those big names in recreation. Your Moabs, Jacksons, Tahoes, Tellurides. Those communities are having to work backwards in some ways to attend to the problems that have sprung up from having too many visitors, too many second homeowners, too many vacation rentals. But for a community like Cortez and Montezuma County, that for many reasons will probably never become one of those overcrowded tourism destinations, there's work being done to actually attract more of the ideal tourist and build infrastructure that supports both locals and visitors. Brian Bartlett works for Mesa Verde Country, the tourism agency in Montezuma County, and he spends his time thinking about how to promote sustainable tourism for the region.
Our secret sauce is responsible visitation, which always leads to sustainable tourism. And we cannot have part of that conversation without the other part. And so we don't, okay? And we really try to educate our audiences, no matter where they may be or where they may come from, to the fact that the resources that exist here don't belong to me, they don't belong to you, they belong to the people that were here before and mostly to the people that will come after. That being the case, we need to view our participation as stewards of this prize and make sure that we're leaving it better than we found it and providing paths to success for the organizations that promote that type of lifestyle and that type of commitment to not just outdoor rec, but to visitation in general. Because, of course, the main point of this is that if we educate the audience to how to engage appropriately with our area, that will not only protect what we have going on here, it will demonstrate to our citizenry that we take it seriously, that we want to protect the resource, and we're not just trying to put heads in beds at the expense of what we have to offer. And that is something that's newer for this area. As you know, it's new for a lot of places, but for here it's very much newer because for a long time people just, there was definitely a 50% crowd that was anti-tourism, anti-visitation, and a 50% crowd that was like, bring them on, we need the money. And although both of those are great viewpoints, there's a balance in the middle that we try to achieve. And so that brings me to the sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism is on us as hosts. Okay, so we need to know that once we've taken the responsible visitation and shared it with our audience, made sure that they know how to interact and engage with us, our resources, our community, everything that we have, then we as hosts or representatives of the parent area have a real deep responsibility to make sure that we are also taking care of our resources in that way and making certain that it's not like, well, yeah, we keep it nice for the visitors, but when you're here, just go and do what you want.
Monte Vista, Colorado is located about 3 hours from Montezuma County in the San Luis Valley, a high elevation valley known for agriculture and access to some of the tallest mountains in the state. It's a small town of about 4,000 residents. And in 2022, the town, in partnership with a local nonprofit, San Luis Valley Great Outdoors, or SLV Go, received a Recreation Economies for Rural Communities, or RERC grant. RERC is a program in partnership with the EPA's Office of Community Revitalization, the USDA's Forest Service, the Northern Border Regional Commission, the Appalachian Regional Commission, and the Denali Commission. The program provides planning assistance for rural communities to grow their recreation economies. This could look like Main Street revitalization to support bringing visitors into the community, building infrastructure like trails, and creating community consensus on how to attract visitors and manage natural resources. SLV Go applied to be a part of the RERC program on behalf of the city of Monte Vista, and over the past 2 years, they've worked to bring the community together to plan for the future of recreation in the region. Mick Daniel is the executive director of SLV Go.
A big focus of that work was really about connecting Main Street businesses to outdoor recreation. There's also this concept of outdoor businesses and the broader San Luis Valley, like Great Sand Dunes National Park and an area just outside of town we call Rock Creek, which is a canyon that a lot of people recreate up, hunt, fish, ride bikes, ski, but we have these places. And so how do we connect those businesses to those people who are using those sites? We had installed this trail called the Skeff Trail, which was just kind of just outside a neighborhood and behind a couple of businesses, Big R, San Luis Valley Federal, and one of our local grocery stores just back there. And it has become a really popular trail. I think a lot of people do their morning walk out there. A lot of people walking their dogs there, and kids are riding their bikes on the trail. That's it. It's if we create these spaces that connect our communities to them, it kind of becomes that place where you bump into the neighbor that maybe you never said hi to before.
Now, Monte Vista and SLV Go have an even bigger trail project in mind that brings together the ag and recreational goals of the community. It's known as the Lariat Ditch Project.
So the Lariat Ditch is like a 2-mile tract that runs through the north side of Monte Vista. It's a open water ditch, and it's literally behind people's houses. There's some right of way access for the ditch owners and the city as well in their backyards. And people have used this waterway for recreation. They have definitely floated on it, when the water was high, and they've definitely walked along the ditch roads. But the ditch company, their goal is to keep water flowing through it. And so, they're piling up big debris piles and stuff right on the ditch. And that's in people's backyards, and trash and everything that gets in there is all ending up just kind of piled up because the ditch company's not in the trash business. So if that stuff ends up in there, as it does in all waterways, they're just piling it up. And it's been a nuisance, I think, for neighbors and stuff for a long time. It had kind of become a big deal, and they had a lot of a lot of loss, like almost 30% of their water was lost just in the city of Monte Vista from it seeping through the walls of the ditch. And that's a big deal for a water company and the ag users downstream of that. I had heard of this idea before. It wasn't SOV Goes, and to be honest, it had been floating around the community probably for 15, 20 years, but it's just such a big project. Like the community never come together on it. And so it came up in the RERC meetings, like this idea of using the ditch as a pathway to connect communities. And it goes by the golf course and the high school and tennis courts, goes through these neighborhoods and right by downtown behind it and all the way down and comes really close to a park on that side of the town and gets within like maybe a half mile of our Sky High Conference Center, which they just put a lot of money into. And they're putting some ball fields over there and I think a hotel in the future. And the rodeo grounds are there too. And so Monte Vista is known for this really big event called Stampede. And it's like one of the oldest rodeos in Colorado, if not the oldest. And they have music and like they have a fair and all these people show up. And so like, what if we can connect this community to these like valuable recreation resources? And maybe we don't think about them as outdoor recreation, but a rodeo is pretty much as outdoor rec, you know, but what if we can connect these communities and they wouldn't have to drive a vehicle, and what if that path became a place for kids to learn to ride bikes and people to walk dogs and an easy way to get to school, and all of that connected it on this 2-mile trail.
As of early January 2025, according to Gigi Dennis, the city manager of Monte Vista, the city had applied for a $12 million grant to fund the project. As a city with a budget of about $4 million, this is a huge grant and it would be a big project for the community. For towns like Monte Vista and Cortez, recreation isn't the main industry. These aren't the types of towns or communities that you would initially think of as popular tourist destinations, but they are places that have incredible access to the outdoors, and the people who live there, whether they've lived there for generations or have moved recently to get closer to the outdoors and find a slower pace of life in a rural community, value that connection. It touches on something that I heard over and over again in my reporting for this project. The people working behind the scenes on growing and planning for these recreation destinations, whether they welcome hundreds of thousands or millions of people a year, they all care the most about the people who already live there. And especially the folks from Monte Vista and Cortez that I talked to, they stressed over and over that what is good for the community is good for tourists, at least the type of tourist that they want to attract. A trail like the Lariat Ditch or the path to Mesa Verde does just as much good for the people who live there as it does for those who visit, if not more. Quality restaurants need to be supported by the community, not just by tourists. This is how you build a recreation economy, by listening to what the community wants and needs and building from there. A recreation economy is more than just tourism. It's manufacturing, it's trails and infrastructure, it's land management. It's bringing people to the community because of outdoor access who end up moving there, opening a new business, and contributing to a thriving small business economy. It's not driving out locals who can no longer afford to live in an area due to rising second homeowners and price increases. It's creating a high quality of life for the people who already live there. Of course, visitors and tourism is a big part of it, but I wanted to start this series by telling you these stories of communities that are not huge tourism destinations, but they want to develop their recreation economies in a sustainable way. Because that sets the scene for where we're going next. Housing in some of the biggest destinations in the West. In the next episode, we're headed to Moab, Utah, and Taos, New Mexico, two places that struggle with a housing crisis due to how popular they are as tourism destinations. But both places have some unique solutions on how to make housing work for them. That's next time on Getaway, a look into rural America's recreation towns. Thanks for listening. I'm Ilana Newman. You've been listening to Getaway on the Rural Remix podcast feed. This episode was produced and edited by me, Ilana Newman. Julia Tilton is our associate producer, and our executive producer is Joel Cohen. Original music by Quincy Ponver and Leo Posel. Rural Remix is a production of the Center for Rural Strategies, and we would like to thank the staff of the Daily Yonder and the Rural Assembly.